So let's dive in. Well, let's do a little bit of a review. Last week, we did a massive overview of the spirit of Jezebel. Jezebel being a queen in 1st and 2nd Kings, a wicked queen who worked behind the scenes. This spirit sought to take control, to manipulate, and to dominate from the second chair. Ahab was a puppet. He was a passive, neutered king who was idolatrous in every way, shape, and form. And even scripture says that there had not been a king that had done more wickedness than Ahab up until that point. The king of Israel had built an Asherah pole, had built an altar to Baal, literally as his first act of king, as being a king, marrying the queen Jezebel, who ended up being sacrificed and set apart for the god Baal, lowercase g. And so Jezebel, we learned last week, gets her power from Asherah and Baal. And we later walked through the story. We talked briefly about some of the situations that Ahab was in, how he didn't get what he wanted. Instead of addressing it himself and dealing with it himself, he ended up whining and complaining to his wife, who then took matters into her own hands. And Jezebel ended up writing letters, sending messages, coordinating a coup to try to murder, well, it was successful, to murder Naboth to win his vineyard back. Jezebel was a wicked queen that was murderous, that was seductive, and that was rebellious. Behind rebellion is every evil work, selfish ambition. Jezebel, which really in a lot of ways, Jezebel set the stage for the showdown at Mount Carmel with Elijah. What happened there? You guys know the story. Many of you know the story. So we ended up having a showdown where 450 prophets of Baal had come, and then 400 prophets of Asherah came as well. And so the prophets of Baal cried out for their God to bring down fire upon the sacrifice that was on the altar. And Elijah, who dealt with Baal by causing it to not rain for 3 years, he bound and dealt with the spirit of Baal. So when they got to the showdown on Mount Carmel, the work was done. Baal was nowhere to be found. And that tells me that actually he is somewhere to be found up until this point. I want you to think about that. There was no reason for him to bind him or to deal with him if he wasn't actually in operation. So this demon, this false god, had some sort of power. But God is greater. There is no power that Jesus can't overcome. And so we saw Elijah, the prophet, the man of God, deal with the spirit of Baal, the God-like figure, false God-like figure, Baal. And so it didn't rain for 3 years, and they got to Mount Carmel, and everything was dealt with. He mocked them. Elijah mocked them. We're telling them they need to try harder. Maybe he's on the bathroom. Meanwhile, they cut themselves. They danced even harder. They did the rituals. Nothing. And then Elijah prepared the altar, added water even, and called down fire in it, and God responded. And then the prophets of Baal were killed, 450 prophets. But then what happened to the prophets of Asherah? Well, after this Mount Carmel experience, Ahab left. He fled and went home to Jezebel. My assumption in this is that the prophets of Asherah were nowhere to be found. And so Elijah went to his next assignment, apparently, and Ahab went home, told Jezebel all that had happened, and Jezebel took matters into her own hand. and she sent a message. And Elijah, the prophet of God, saw the message prophetically. I've heard it described as like a cloud that just overwhelmed him. As he saw the message, this cloud just came upon him. And as he saw prophetically the words that Jezebel communicated, he ran. And where did he run to? He ran to a cave. I believe we're talking like 80 miles in the other direction. After just killing 450 prophets of Baal, he ran from one person. Those words must have been powerful. Or, I would say it this way, he was deceived. He was powerfully deceived. And so as he found himself in a cave, he literally wanted to die. He was suicidal. He was depressed. And God met him in that place. God wasn't in the thunder. He wasn't in the fire. He wasn't in the loud, I believe, experiences that were meant to wake up Elijah. He was in the still small voice. And his voice his word to Elijah was, "What are you doing here?" Elijah, moving in pride, felt like he believed that he was the only prophet left. So he was totally wrong. Because little did he know that there's 7,000 more prophets that have not bowed their knee. And so, because of Jezebel's words, Elijah lost his ministry. And so he did not complete his task. And as I shared this story, for some of you, this feels familiar. Jezebel's words can be really powerful. But it doesn't mean that she's strong. It just means that she's effective in the area that she's been given power. She writes messages. She ushers in threats. She seeks to find a way in to attack you at your point of weakness. She can use food. She can seduce. She can control and manipulate. But here's something I want to bring up before we really dive into what's behind Jezebel. If you don't deal with Jezebel, she will deal with you. And what you don't deal with will get passed down.